these multiple identities that we bring to the table. And oftentimes, I say as Black folks, our bodies at one point were not our own. And I feel like we still feel those echoes of that post-traumatic slave, that whole thing is echoing day in and day out in so many of our experiences. And it's very clear in our music that we produce, that we put out as Black folks in this country. If you're really listening, if you're really paying attention, it is very clear, the state of where we are as folks as well as Black artists. So
what you were saying about physically fighting for your life every day and then having to come into a predominantly white space and have to justify your existence all the time by qualifying who you are and naming who you are, knowing good and well people see you, right? And you have to say it to somehow soften it or something like that. Make it more tolerable, make it more, I don't know, make it easier to be possessed.
And what that just kind of brings me back to that the opening, the first song, and where it says, "I am the Black Messiah, if you let me."
yeah. That chorus, they call me the Black Messiah. I wear no chains, I wear no whips, but I'll bear your pain. Call me the Black Messiah. Da 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 da. If you let me. Da 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 da. And what I always thought about was these naming of things, as Leah just said. I got to be queer, I got to be Black, I got to be this, I got to be cis, I got to be, there's just so many things. It can be overwhelming, but as I see it, as an artist in my space, in Black spaces, I'm Adrian, and I'm Adrian, and I get to show up, and I see, the Black Messiah in a very similar thing, is to say that mentality, that heart, that spirit that flows through the music is the idea of liberation and peace and the things that we need to succeed, to have wholeness. And when I say, I am the Black Messiah, no, a number of my white colleagues said, Adrian, I think this is a problem. You're saying you're Jesus. This is a problem. I don't know that this is a great idea and that people are going to understand it and, et cetera. But the reality is that, no, I know, what I mean. I know that, what I'm saying is that the Black Messiah is a mentality. It is Black liberation. It is pro-Black. It is not anti-Black. It cannot be. And so, again, embracing those things and saying that, giving that space to be, to just be, free from, gun violence and narratives of violence and narratives of this and all of these things that are put on you as a Black man, a Black gay man, and or a Black person, period, Black woman, Black trans woman, Black, whatever identifier that comes after Black, right? There's going to be so many things that are kind of put on you and that you're expected to wear. And when you don't wear them, in any space, there's some type of pushback. And so that whole part about not just the if you let me, but that, this is something that is personal and it's something that we all have to do. It's the work of everyone, not just, those of us who are Black, who are the oppressed or have been historically, but to say that if you let me, I will be there. You know what I mean? If you let me, and to see that as, from a religious standpoint as well, that we as Black folks, our definitions of religion, whether we call ourselves Christian, Kojic, Pentecostal, whatever, when you talk to us about what we believe and who we are and all of those things, our ideas of God, I think, are far more expansive than we are often also given credit for as well, as I hope that is exhibited here in the Black Messiah as well.
I'd like to hear from you the history of Black Messiah as an album.
Yeah, so as an album, it's a new thing. This is actually a performance we've done for the past 4 years. And actually, the very first year we did it was the year that Donald J. Trump was elected president. And I thought that it was critical at that moment that, I felt like so much of the Christian narrative in mass media was dominated by what I felt like was hate speech, right? Or things that did not align with the Christ that I saw, the Black Messiah. And I felt like it was an important moment, not just in the life of the church, but in the life of these United States to release this work as a live performance work. And so we've done that for the past 3 to 4 years. And during 2021, I thought would be an excellent idea to preserve that, right, in the form of a digital album.
I'm thinking about how the work of the Black Messiah in relationship to this idea of Black music matters is also tethered to the kind of the range of liberatory struggle that exists within Black communities. And so I'm wondering about the overall construction and orchestration of this piece, how the various threads or the different ways in which music is composed in particular here, how you see that might playing out as possibly a form of resistance, and then also how is that connected to freedom dreaming within Black communities, the actual composition and orchestration of the work.
So I think that the actual music, or the mechanics, if you will, under the hood, what's there is a real journey and kind of embracing of so many styles. Obviously, the Black Messiah is rooted very much so in the gospel style. But I also feel like, as you hear on the record, very strong overtones of jazz, right? Very strong overtones of blues, and also overtones of what we would consider classical music in America. So, for example, in the piece "The Black Messiah," the title piece, the Black Messiah is the voice of Kendall, and who goes by Tony Famous, is his stage name, and he is delivering, this amazing rap verse in the Black Messiah, and it starts off with a very kind of operatic kind of overtone or bugle call in the beginning of the piece, because I felt like, these are things that we are as Black folks, as Black artists, as Black musicians. We are all these things. We are opera singers, we are conductors and orchestrators and all of these things. And so the Black Messiah really takes you through a journey in a very dramatic way, I believe. You hear also in the Black Messiah a lot of call and response, right? These are very foundational pieces to Black music in the United States. Oftentimes, I hear colleagues say, well, what is Black music? And how can you say Black music is American? Or how can you say these things? And I can say that, as for me, right, for Adrian Dunn and my compositional idea and the things that I'm trying to say in my work, is that we are everything. Not that we are this or that, but we are all of that and more. And so, in the musical identity of these pieces, as I pointed to in Black Messiah, where you'll hear, these huge high C, high D soprano obligatos, and then also into Rejoice, you'll hear those same overtones, but contrasting that with a piece like Rise Up, where this is the language of resistance. And when I say the language, I mean not just the actual words that are spoken or the lyrics, but I'm talking about the musical vocabulary as well, which is very important in this conversation. So in a song like Rise Up, the entire band is live, right? That's an important piece. Everyone who is that you hear on that piece is a human being playing an instrument, and is very much so a part of the Black art aesthetic as I see it. And in Rise Up, at the end of Rise Up, also the chromatic passages that lead us to the build up at the very end of the storytelling in both rap verses as well. One of my favorite songs, though, if I may, talk about from the Black Messiah, Love the Black Messiah, of course, the title song. But I also really love the song Wonderful. And this is based on the text of For Unto Us a Child is Born. because I believe so very much so that in the academy right now, particularly in music criticism and particularly in the kind of Western Eurocentric music spaces, we are not really, as Black artists, encouraged to use our own music and our own expressions unapologetically. Gospel music has, in my opinion, continuously been treated as a stepchild of America, as I like to see it, even though we all know very well that the world over loves a gospel choir, loves gospel music. Every time we turn on an award show or the Oscars or whatever, there's a choir, and primarily a gospel choir. And so I think that, wonderful just for me embodies not just the actual voices of the singers. You also hear in a very virtuosic way, and the mic toss at the end, really embodying everything that we are as Black folks, and our brilliance, our genius, our virtuosity in regards to improvisation, as well as our virtuosity in the ad lib and telling the story essentially off the top of our heads. And I don't mean that in a in a negative way, but in the most beautiful way that we do as Black folks.
A few things that kind of come to mind right now. Actually, I would love for us to listen to Wonderful, just a brief moment of it, and kind of talk about that and what's taking place in the music there, and maybe even think about how it's related to creativity and the art therapies.
To us a son is given, for unto us a child is born, for unto us a son is given, for unto us a child is born. His name is Wonderful. His name is Counselor. His name is Wonderful. His name is Counselor. His name is everything. For unto us a son is given. For unto us a child is born. For unto us a son is given. For unto us a child is born. Oh, and his name is Wonderful. His name is Counselor. His name is everything. It's everything. You are wonderful. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. You are wonderful. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. You are wonderful. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. You are wonderful. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. For unto us a son is given. For unto us a child is born. For unto us a son is given. For unto us a child is born. And his name is Wonderful. And his name is Counselor. His name is Wonderful. His name is Counselor. everything. Yeah, you are. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. Yeah, you are. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. You are wonderful. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. You are wonderful. Counselor, Prince of Peace, mighty God. Hey, your name is everything, Jesus. Hey, your name is everything. Hey, your name is everything. I say, your name is everything. Your name is wonderful. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Say your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Your name is Prince of Peace. Come on. Mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Counselor. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Counselor. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Take it up. Your name is wonderful. Counselor. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Counselor. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Your name is Prince of Peace. You are a mighty God. Your name is wonderful. Counselor. Your name is Prince of Peace. Everybody say wonderful. Counselor. You are a mighty God. Hey, wonderful Counselor. Say you are a mighty God. We call him Jesus. Every baby. He is born in a manger. We call him Jesus. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. Oh, the government shall be on his shoulders. Son of a living God. His name is Jesus. The name of Jesus. Every knee shall bow. Wonderful Counselor. You are a mighty God. Wonderful Counselor. You are a mighty God. Wonderful Counselor. Hey, come on, singers. His name.
We could keep on going, Adrian. We're over here. I don't know if you can see us, but both Leah and I were gone. My spirit is like gone, and I could listen to more and more and more and more and more, and I need to take a moment too in the midst of this, just kind of thinking about, the work that takes place in Black music that is so often contested, undermined, simplified, problematized. There's so many pieces that kind of come to mind where in which we've been whitewashed, thought to not even elevate or adore repetition. And then all of a sudden in different fields and different disciplines, I think about music therapy, where repetition is the cornerstone for most improvisation. And so kind of thinking about the work and not only the work, but what is taking place in the music, that is the lifeblood, the life stream. And thinking about how that can be, again, if taken out of context and taken out of the full authority of the music, how there's a violence that happens to the music outside of this context. And I just want to kind of acknowledge that reality. And you saying Black music matters, I think about the violence that happens to Black music on a daily basis, and yet it rises above it, and it contends with everything and still manages to do what it does and be what it is, you know. And thinking again also about how you've written about how the music is the Holy Spirit. And I'm wondering, like, how are all these pieces coming together for you? How do you see the music defined in this way? And, you know, what can you glean for us so that we were able to kind of sit with the power and the fullness of what you're sharing?
Thank you for, first of all, acknowledging that, because I believe so much so my biggest issue with the academy oftentimes is not the lack of acknowledge, oftentimes in my space as a musician, right, of spirit, that Black music, particularly the music of the church, is something that is heavily rooted in the idea of spirit. And when you take, as you just said, when you take the music out of its intended context and its intended audience and its intended, devices that we're using to deliver this, I feel like there's a lot of other things that then have to be explained when you are ignorant and don't understand those things. And it being put back on the artist as that we are somehow deficient, or we are somehow, unaware of these things. It's like, no, the reality is that our music is complex. It is very much so, in the way that I often talk about the spiritual, right? Is the fact that there is sorrow. There is so much sorrow that it is unbearable and will take you out of here on any day with a simple hum. Will take you out of here. Okay? You don't even have to do the whole song. You don't have to, whatever, all you need to hear is a line, you know what I mean, of any spiritual. And I think what is important is that we are able to acknowledge so much that the music is healing in so many ways because it's in its DNA. It's a part of what is our survival as Black folks, lives in our music. It lives in our expression. It lives in every fiber of who we are. And so when we talk about a song like Wonderful, that again, much like the spiritual, takes the written, sacred, biblical text, the KJV, I call it the King James version of the text, and uses that, but weaves it together, right, with all of these other elements that make the story plain and clear to us who are Black folks and understand that particular type of not just cultural expression, but musical elevation and musical brilliance and genius, and honor it for all of those things, the complexity, again, the good in it, the bad in it, everything, it's all wrapped up in there, you know what I mean? As opposed to parsing it out. And so thank you for acknowledging that, because it's something that I feel like the Black Messiah in and of itself is an act of resistance as a piece. Us just putting this out to the world and saying to the world, as a classically trained musician, some of my colleagues will listen to this and go, well, that's easy. or that's, or that's just, they're just, they're just hollering, or they're just whatever. I want to say, if that was the case, how many years has it been that y'all been trying to holler like us? How many times? How many years? How many white artists will you put in front of us that are singing our words, that are singing our melodies, that are produced by us? Again, white faces on black music, problematic. So somehow when we start to actually own and have agency over our own work, and when we're able to say that this is what it is on our terms, and I'm not asking you, for your permission. I'm not asking you for your blessing, because I don't need your blessing. The only blessing that I needed was from the Creator, and I already had that. So I'm done. I'm here to say that my healing, my agency, who I am and why I write and why I do the work that I do hinges on who I am as a Black man in America, period. Black music matters, period. I matter, period. And so if this is the language of healing and expression and liberation and the way in which I choose to tell it, well, then I'm sorry if there are folks who may not understand it, but I challenge you to listen to more if you seek to find out.
I want to say one thing, and this is not to even contend or discredit or any what has already been said.
Yeah.
But I think about recently, there's this article, right? Thinking about the tensions between, I want to say, academic pursuit and intellectualization of this work, because I also believe that this intellectualization and the synthesis of this work is happening in multiple places, but that academic pursuit, like you've mentioned, is a different place. But there was a conversation about radical healing, what it takes up. And while you were speaking, these frameworks on radical healing for therapists that might not be linked or connected, rather, to the arts and the creative arts and expressive arts spaces, was so profoundly articulated in what you said, that it just spoke to me, because within this idea of radical healing, they're saying that there needs to be two things that are occurring simultaneously. Like there has to be a hope and a freedom and a liberatory process that's taking place, and then also a recognition of the pain and the violence, again, that's taking place in the space. And it's like the way in which you talked about what was happening in that music amplifies that. But at the same time, I know it's the origin of that, And so I just want to just thank you for sharing all of this, because again, we place emphasis in areas that emphasis doesn't need, and then we reduce, and we don't really give weight to the types of work that's happening in so many spaces in Black music and Black culture.
I definitely just wanted to say those things, because I think, where words fall short, I hate that expression sometimes, but there's some truth to that, music is by design, a sonic oration, you know what I mean, of your life, of our lives, and as Black folks, our lives are complex in so many ways, but our lives are beautiful, and they deserve to be affirmed, and they deserve our music, all of it deserves to be affirmed. So no matter whether or not you personally like it, you know what I mean, or you personally whatever, I mean, how many Bach motets and this do we have to see and hear to say that, like, I may not love it, but I gotta study it because it's y'all stuff. But y'all don't study our stuff, but it's the only stuff that y'all continue to take from us on a consistent basis and tell us that our stuff is not good enough to be in your academies or to be on your concert stages or to be anywhere else or to be worthy enough to be in these spaces where people who are committing terrorism against our own bodies and our own works and our own existence. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak, because that is how oftentimes our work as Black artists is reduced to nothing. It's by oftentimes in the academy, I believe, and this is Adrian talking, only Adrian talking, is that the not just the deduction, but the reduction, because certain folks can't get their minds to a place of understanding or expansion outside of how they see it, that limits the contributions of people like myself to that structure, right? Because it's not delivered in those ways and in those confines. And so I appreciate this space from the perspective of healing, and understanding and acknowledging that so much of what we do as artists is intersectional, right? So much of what we do is not this over there and that over here, but it's, it's all of it together, and so those experiences of healing that Black artists, musicians have, that we've given the world. I mean, I am overwhelmed when I think about not just Jesse Norman and the Kathy Battles and, the famous folks, if you will, but when I think about the Nina Simones and I think about the Billie Holidays and I think about their stories that were not told and how they died and how, the government lied to, like when I think of the depths that folks have gone to lie on us as a people and to discredit us as artists and musicians, my heart breaks. And that is why I try so hard to continue to have my music represented in spaces and conversations like this, because I hope that this is the only way that we can bring people aboard along on the fight of why Black music matters and for this music to stand on its own, because it deserves to, even if it's not acknowledged by the Grammys, even if it's not acknowledged by, the establishment.
I do want to kind of bring another context in for your work, because your last point about Black artists and the treatment of Black artists, I think speaks to something else that you bring to this conversation, not only as a composer and as an educator who's constantly having to negotiate white spaces, you are also committed to creating those Black spaces. So, what we hear in the music in terms of this commitment to Black music is a commitment to Black spaces, right? And so I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about Black Music Matters, the community building that you're doing around mental health among Black artists as well.
Absolutely. So last year, I started an organization called Black Music Matters that works around advocacy for Black artists, particularly Black musicians. And I know very strongly in my heart that not just that we need support and help, but also that we need advocates. We need people who will be true allies, and who will support in the fight. And so Black Music Matters has done recently a Black Music Matters Summit last year. We'll be doing our second summit this year in 2021 that cover a range of topics, including mental health, because that is something that is so critical and so important right now as it relates to all folks, and particularly Black artists, that I think is kind of not being getting as much play as it deserves at this particular moment. Also, last week, we premiered the new Rise Orchestra here based in Chicago, Illinois. It's an all-Black professional orchestra that is designed where if you are a Black player studying in any university program, you automatically have a spot in this orchestra. You are mentored by older Black players who are already in the game, already working in the industry. And you automatically at 18 years old can walk in and have a network of folks that it took me 10 years to work on, that these young folks can come in and be mentored by older players. And they also get a check as well, because the economics matter. They do. And so I think part of community building, we are in partnership at Roosevelt University right now. We did our debut concert last week. It is free and on YouTube. If you want to check it out, Adrian Dunn and the Rise Orchestra. The album comes out this Friday on Spotify, and as well as other digital outlets. It's Rise with a Z, R-I-Z-E, the Rise Orchestra. The Adrian Dunn singers as well. Is just a God I mean, they're amazing. That's who you heard. I was like, yeah, those guys who were singing. Um, they are just a blessing, and they're spectacular, all professional group. 15 Black artists trained both in the church as well as in the academy, that can sing you into the ground if it's a gospel song or if it's an opera or whatever. And so what I appreciate about that is that we are helping to change that narrative by touring every year with the Redemption album, the spirituals that are dedicated to Black men and women murdered by police. Us touring that context and touring that piece and touring that record, is helping us to reclaim the narrative that, number one, that we're taking our stuff back, if it ever was confused about whose it was, but also that we are doing the work to make sure that we are performing for Black folks, that we are not just going into, the main concert halls and the big stages, but that we are also doing the work to make sure that we are singing and making sure that this music, our legacy, our story is preserved through performance, as best we can as well. Everything we do also, is 85 to 90% all Black produced. All of our, from writers to performers to engineers to graphic designers to, all of those things, because the business of music matters too, right? Who we're hiring behind the scenes and how we're able to make that happen and provide opportunities so that this music can continue to happen.